question number one.
Question number one.
The pink Power Ranger. You'd hit that, right?
Yeah. Of course.
Especially because they got a new Power Ranger series out.
Yeah,
There's a hot new pink Power Ranger.
Definitely. Leanne, I'm sorry, sweetie.
So there is on Blade Forum, obviously there is a excessive amount of haters for no apparent reason that are just absolute knife snobs, and anything out of the ordinary they bitch about. But one of the biggest things I had noticed on there is that it seems to be everyone that disliked Mantis for any reason is trying just to push the concept that Quartermaster is nothing more than a spin-off.
Oh.
And I'm kind of curious where you kind of come from on that.
Well, they're two entirely different companies. Mantis was my brainchild. Quartermaster was not. Mantis had a variety of items produced domestically as well as overseas, and Quartermaster is strictly domestic production only. Not all the ideas that are going to come to fruition out of Quartermaster came from my brain. Some of them have so far, not all of them. So really, it's an entirely different animal and an entirely different direction. And from my understanding, I don't think Quartermaster is even going to go after the same people from the militia. They're not even trying to get those same type of customers.
Okay. So what is a subliminal frame lock? Because that's kind of what you had on the website, and when I did my reviews of the first four, I kind of get the fact that it flows with the design,
sure.
But kind of where did that concept
Well, actually, the first people to use that term was Kershaw. They used that on the 777. They called it a subframe lock, which was essentially just a short name for subliminal frame lock. And so what it basically is just it goes to describe the way that the handle kind of comes over top of the frame, therefore kind of making it look as if it's a liner, but it's really still the frame. And the G10 is really just a scale that lays over the top of it to stop it from overextension.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, favorite color?
Depends on what we're talking about. On cars, I would say black is probably my favorite color. On knives is bead blast a color. On knives is black oxide. I mean, it's kind of funny when you ask that though, because it really does depend a lot on what it's being applied to. Clothing is different than cars, is different than knives. So yeah, it depends on what we're talking about.
All right. Yeah. Excellent. So the other big issue that people kind of had with Mantis specifically was the knife steel, saying it's a variant of one, where people are trying to say it's kind of not, and you're using a lesser quality steel than what was being sold out there. And I'm kind of just curious that if you chose to do it as an analogous steel, where would anyone kind of be able to kind of find the information to see if they could actually, compare the steels, chemically or anything like that? Was that ever made available?
Well, from what I understand, people can pick up an XRF. They can do a spectrometer if they want on anything. So even after a steel has been hardened, you can still find out what it's comprised of, what the ingredients in the alloy are exactly. And as most major knife companies out there, as well as any other people that are doing anything high-end regarding steels, have access to an XRF handheld, either a handheld XRF machine or a tabletop one, where you can actually feed X-ray, you bombard X-rays into the alloy itself with fluorescent as well, and it'll give you back a reading to tell you what's inside of it. So that's something that's free for anybody to do, and they can do that to see what's in the steels. But I've never knowingly told anybody any false information regarding steels or warranties or anything like that, because it's important when you're trying to sell a high-end piece of cutlery and you're trying to make a living in a particular industry. It's important to always be as stand-up as you possibly can be with regards to warranty and information on your product.
Cool. The next thing is that there was I'm not sure if it's all the Tough Tonys, but the blade steel was S60V.
Yes.
And you brought an S60V knife to market with a pretty decent slab of it at a $65 price point, where a lot of people couldn't even get the slab of S60V for the price you were selling the whole knife.
A lot of people couldn't even get it at all, period. Couldn't get the steel at all. It was difficult to find at the time, but I had a friend who was in the auction business, actually. It's the same friend of mine who gave me a sneak peek at the Camillus customer list before it was sold, just a few months after. Anyway, it's all who you know, man. It's all who you know. And when you have the ability to pick up something and you see that it's a good price and you feel like you can make some money at it, you got to do it, regardless of if people are going to have something to say about it.
Because that was the biggest thing with that S60V. It's like, and I've seen other knives that come out with S60V, and the prices are outrageous.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
we were able to come to market at a price point that just kind of blew people out of the water.
Well, I did the same thing back in 2006 with the first 11 Mantis knives that were even ever created. There was one called the Class Act, then there was the Classier, then there was the Classiest. And the Classier and the Classiest Act, the MT2 SC and the MT2 Ti, they both sported an S30V blade. And it was the first S30V blade on the market to ever be sold for less than $100. And so I did it then too, and it didn't seem like as many people cried about it.
That was my first Mantis knife, was the bottom of that 3 list.
Okay.
That was the first one I ever bought.
That was the one that sold for 45.
Yeah, and at that time I didn't know enough about knives, and I was like, oh, cool. And Brent told me, oh, it's a good blade steel, and it's the first actual carry knife I bought that I carried for about 6 months until my girlfriend at that time commandeered it, and I never saw it again.
Well, hey, it's a comfortable knife. What can I say?
It was a good, a little small for my hands, but for her it was like the perfect knife.
And my experience with that knife and the vanadium steel that was in that particular one, it turned out really, really nice. And so I always had an affinity for that type of, for that family of steels.
For that knife though, I'd always wish you would have made a bigger one.
Yeah, we could.
That knife, like twice as big, man. I would have been all.
Well, that's the beauty of it, though. I mean, there's almost 60 knives in the Mantis lineup, and even though I'm not working at Mantis anymore, I've still got access to all those designs. They're all my original designs, so I can redo them. I can make them larger, smaller, put a gut hook on one of them, glass breaker on another. That's the nice thing, is that you can go back, and sometimes in the knife business, you'll get a chance to make an improvement on something that was good, but not necessarily as good as it could have been. And that's the nice thing about the knife market, is that you can kind of reinvent it if it was lacking in any particular way.
So last year when you came out to Phoenix for your first knife talk, you had a knife, and I forget who made it, but it was a very large flip out knife, and it had 2 flick out hand guards.
Yeah.
Where did that knife ever go? Because I wanted one of those the minute you flipped it out, and I've never seen it come to market.
I'm glad you asked me about that one. That one's Michael Hawk's. That one's Michael Hawk. He actually designed that around the fact that he felt as if when he would get fatigued over time, when he was out doing survival, he was always really worried about the possibility of slipping his hand off of the handle and onto the blade during a high strength type situation. And he was under the firm belief that if you begin to bleed out when you're out in the wilderness, and you should be concentrating on shelter and finding food in these things, and instead now you're worried about whether you're going to bleed out or not, then that was the first big mistake in a series of mistakes that could end in death.
Okay.
And he wanted to make sure that he had flip out finger guards that gave him the ability to securely and secondarily secure his hand against any possible slippage or anything like that as time went on. So actually now, as we speak, there's a bead blasted version of that knife that's the size that you saw, very big, like 5.5-inch blade on it.
Yeah.
And then there was an elite version of that same knife that has a 4-inch blade on it, and it's much thinner and much more thin, much lighter, and it's available in blackstone finish as well as the blade, the bead blast finish.
And where are they on the market already?
Yeah, they're on the market now. They're sold at michaelhawkknives.com. They're also being sold at SmokyMountainKnifeWorks.com, and they will be soon here at Mr. Knife Guy.
Okay.
And they'll also be Knife Center and Blade HQ as well.
What was the kind of a rough price point on where those are at?
The large one I think is selling right now for about $50 or $60. It's an AUS 8 blade steel, and then the smaller version is selling for $39. And I know that because it's more recent than the larger.
A lot of people have an issue with that AUS 8 blade steel because, the rust issues, and if you're in a more, moist environment, or environment with more moisture, you're near the water, stuff like that, it rusts. But here in the desert, I'm a huge fan of AUS 8 because it's
nice
super easy to sharpen.
There you go.
I mean, you can get those little crappy $10, V sharpeners from REI, and
just a couple times it'll do you right. It really will. AUS 8's a cool steel for that.
Yeah, in a desert environment like we have here in Arizona, it's a perfect steel here.
Yeah, man.
If you could be any animal, what would it be and why?
Oh man, that's awesome. I'd want to be a peregrine falcon.
Nice.
Because they just haul ass through the sky, and they are, I believe, the fastest flying bird. And I think that's actually what Hayabusa means in Japanese. It means peregrine falcon, and Hayabusa happens to be their fastest Suzuki motorcycle that they have.
It's funny because I've got a Gixxer 1000.
Okay,
and
so the Gixxer is a faster...
It's a smaller body, but almost as big a motor than that's the 1300.
Right, and so that one accelerates faster than the Hayabusa, but the Hayabusa, I guess, has the
massive top end,
200 and some miles an hour or something on a motorcycle, which is obviously pretty crazy. But I've always thought that flying through the air at a very fast pace would be an enormous exhilaration and rush, and yeah, that would definitely be. I'd go with peregrine falcon, man.
So the one thing I've noticed, and I've heard this complaint about your designs before, and I've noticed it on a few of the ones that I like that I've had to make small modifications to fit my usage, is that some of your knives tend to be a little bit more bulky as opposed to ergonomic for kind of a handle. Or it's like we can take the Quartermaster line where you have kind of like the G10 on there where there's no rounding on it. It's very angular and machine looking. And it's I'm curious, where a lot of people are always talking about, you know, form fitting and ergonomics. Why have you kind of chosen to stay with that more machine rigid look?
Well, I guess to me ergonomics means something slightly different than those critics. When they say ergonomic, maybe they're talking about comfort, and me, I'm talking more about biology. You know, about where the fingers naturally want to go to, where they naturally spread apart from the fingers and naturally where it wants to go. Not so much about curves and soft sides and things like that. So when I'm going to, I do the corners the way I do them, and the angles the way I do them, because aesthetically it's pleasing to me. I personally will make a sacrifice of a little bit of comfort for a cool look. I know that a lot of people don't feel that way about things. But as long as it doesn't lose any of the utility because of it, I believe that it's a cool way, and it's a slightly different way. It's my own little signature way of doing it. There have been designs I've done in the past for brands outside of Quartermaster, Mantis, Colt, Michael Hawk, Combat Ready, things that are for even other guys that request from the very beginning that they want something curvy and sexy. And they'll get something curvy and sexy out of me. So I can do it in other ways. It's just that when it's for a brand that has a particular image to it, I just want to kind of stay true to that image, and then also to stay true to my own style. So that's kind of...
Nice, nice. So the last question I have, there's two questions left, one of which is something I noticed, and I don't know if anyone else noticed, but that the fourth of the first Quartermasters that came out, the Murdoch and the Tough Tony, very similar design, size, shape. I noticed the Quartermaster is a little bit thicker on the sides than the Tough Tony is. You had these three designs that came before it, and then that one seemed to me, at least, to be just kind of there wasn't another design, and you kind of brought one over. Granted, I do enjoy the Tough Tony and the Wiley E that you brought out, and it was only available here last time you were here in Phoenix. Is a great knife, and I love it. I've got two of them, but kind of where did that happen, where instead of having a totally different design that you brought that design in?
That's a cool question too, actually. That's how we became acquainted. The gentlemen who are running the Quartermaster brand from the backside, that's how they originally became acquainted with my designs, was by that particular piece. And so we kind of came to an agreement that they would supercharge that design with their own technology, which of course is the orb pivot system.
Right.
And so the addition of the orb pivot system into that particular knife just changed that knife drastically. I mean, we always had issues with that knife because of the short blade and the more difficulty that it required, or the more effort that it took to open up the blade because of the fact that it was so short, and because it was a thick blade as well. So adding that orb pivot system on there really changed the game for that knife, and then changing the blade steel to the 154 to match everything else in that lineup, then doing the titanium nitride coating, and those features, as well as the increased size of the hardware that was used along the spine of the knife. Those changes we thought were significant enough to actually bring forth a different model, or something that was named something different, because it was those changes were significant enough in appearance and functionality. in order to create something new. So we started there, and then for the other three, that was actually where we began.
Okay, so that was the first.
Yeah, that was the first one.
Right.
Yeah, that was how we became acquainted. And then the other three, of course, are very different from anything that you've seen before. And at their request really was to create something that was that looked uncomfortable to hold. Their exact words were they wanted it to look like an angry porcupine. Like they wanted it, they did. They said they wanted to look like something that would. What in the world is that thing for? But when you pick it up, that it actually feels real nice to hold. And I think that if you use your thumb as a guide, like I was telling you, the crew earlier when we were talking, I like to use my thumb on the back of the handle as a guide to where to put the rest of my hand. So if you slide your thumb into that sweet spot on the back of the handle, on the handle especially, or any of the knives, and you put your thumb where you feel like your thumb is supposed to be, the rest of your hand will just grip right around that thing, and it'll feel really natural. And to me, that's what ergonomic is. And that's that's it for the Quartermaster. Yeah.
Nice. Because that's the one thing. Because and anybody that's watched my reviews of them, and I know I posted them on your Facebook and Brant's and everyone else I could. I love the Hannibal. I love the size of it, the shape of it, the crazy off the wall look of it.
Even the triple thumb studs.
I actually took them off of mine.
See, that was a common
simply
thing.
for the fact that when I was carrying it,
Yeah.
I actually was just killing my pair of jeans. I actually ripped out a pocket because every time I pulled it out, that thumb stud just happened to just catch right there,
Yeah.
and I just kind of wore right through that corner. So I took them off, and then I noticed it when I went camping, and I used it to break up some wood and to crack wood through, and I had them in there still. I lost a little bit of the blade length.
Yeah.
When I was using it. And so by taking those out, and I actually took them out while we were camping, just to get more purchase area to actually, bust up the wood I needed for my fire.
Gotcha. Not a bad idea. And I've seen it done actually a few times where people have removed them. And so then there were a couple reasons why we didn't put them in the fixed blade version. Obviously, you don't need a thumb stud in the fixed blade version. So we took them out, and I realized that I liked them. I like it without the thumb stud as well. On that particular design, you can either use one of those three thumb studs on each side, or you can use the flipper device. So really, they're not needed at all. But in a way, you kind of have to have them on a fixed or on a folding knife, and so we offer the opportunity to look a little bit different, as well as the functionality of both, so you can have one or the other, especially with the ambidextrous open as well.
So pink lawn flamingos, how many are in your front yard?
16.
Nice.
16, and they're lined up in a way where they're along the walkway. So just as you forget about the first one you saw, the second one comes into view.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've always wanted one. Unfortunately, the
I have a couple.
says no.
Well, and I've had that happen before, where the HOA just won't let you go for it, and then the lawn gnomes.
Oh, lawn gnomes.
Yeah,
are great.
they'll definitely make you remove those too.
So that's all I have the questions for the knife aspect of it. Now I've got a few questions, and people that don't know you, aren't going to know that Mantis made a NRA knife that was available through the NRA. I got one simply for the fact that I want to be able to support the NRA and get money into them, because they're the only ones out there fighting for our rights to have our guns and fight for the Second Amendment. Kind of where did you kind of get into that whole ability to get the NRA a blade?
Well, I've been a life member of the NRA since I was just a young kid, and it's been part of my family for a long time. And the right to bear arms is something that we take seriously in my family, and we take our own security as our own responsibility. And I am a self-sustaining type of person. I'm not the type of person to go out and ask for help when I feel like I can do it myself. And so I take my own security into my own hands. And so ever since the very beginning with the NRA life member, and then more recently, now that I'm a benefactor for the NRA, and with the ability to do that was exciting as well. But the NRA guys were concerned with creating an amazing USA-made knife that was innovative and different looking. And when we came out with the Tough Tony knife, they took notice of the knife, and they said, "Hey, what do you think about building us a special edition of that particular knife and putting our new NRA tactical logo on it?" Because at the time they had something that said NRA on the side, and it just it was the standard block letters. It looked good, but it was just NRA.
That and before any NRA knife was just I think it was a case knife was the only one I'd ever seen before that.
Right, and they weren't all that much fun, But at the time that they brought in the Tough Tony knife, they also had a SOG Trident as well.
Okay.
And so I did know that they had brought that one in as well, and they were saying that that one was a good seller. I think they were selling it for $79 or $99, and they wanted to bring something in that was just slightly lower price tag, but still USA, and still, you know, the whole deal. And so we went ahead and made them a special edition of that knife, and they ended up calling it the Bulldog. And so that was an extremely successful thing for them. We were very excited to do it. I mean, to me, as a newcomer, being that it was within the first 5 years in the industry,
right.
And having them take notice of something that we had done was a great honor, and something that I really wanted to focus on and give them the very best of what we could. And so we gave them the very best possible quality we could, very best customer service we could. And I think that followed all the way through into their membership, because when they were selling, they were giving out their catalogs, they got a whole heck of a lot of orders right off the bat for it. And they were convinced that it was because they had named it after an animal of some type. And so then when we got the opportunity to do a second one, based off of the MT 7.2, which is the second version of the folding pry, they ended up calling it the Primate.
Yeah.
And then in the catalog, they touted it as being the industry's 500-pound gorilla or something like that. And I thought it was really amusing. I thought it was a cool way to market it. So now they've kind of fallen into a theme with some of my designs, naming them after wild animals and things.
Nice.
And so the next one they're going to be doing, there will likely be a quartermaster piece. They're going to name it after a shark of some type, vicious.
I'm telling you, if you get the chance to give them a name, the Mako.
The Mako.
Because when I saw the knife that you brought as the prototype here, and we started talking about that, that was the first shark that came from all the Mako.
Okay.
That cool pattern. If you look at a Mako shark and you look at the anodizing you guys did on that, it's just that's.
And here I was. My first thing about because of course the name is always important with a fun product like that. And so I go online and I search for a list of the world's deadliest sharks when it comes to human attacks.
Right.
And of course the great white is right up there. And there's a few different ones. And I found one that was the Requiem shark. And I thought Requiem is kind of a cool name, but it's pretty abstract, so maybe that won't end up for them. But we'll let them make that decision, and I'll just make the knife really good, and we'll see if it sells well. I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure that they've had good success so far with a couple of the pieces that we've done together. So I don't see any reason as to why the third one wouldn't succeed as well.
I'm excited for that knife. That's one of the ones I want in my collection.
Well, good, man.
I got a question for you. When the first time I met you and the first time you came out here last year, it's actually almost a year ago you came out, and you said Mantis started from, was it GT Knives, or what was the company that you bought that you brought and then kind of went forward with?
It was, well, yeah, Mantis was created, and then GT Knives became available right about 1 to 2 months after Mantis Knives was first thought up.
Okay.
And which allowed us a sort of a jump start into the industry by picking up a couple patents that are beautiful patents right off the bat that hadn't been used up until I'm starting to use them now in a couple other things that I'm doing. But the button lock patent, which they called it a biscuit mechanism, and that was a very cool piece, and it was definitely a good asset to have, as well as the machinery that we were able to bring up from San Diego and start using that in Anaheim. And so that was the GT Knife Company, and that was started by Greg Bark and Todd Jones, and that was in the 90s, and they were ATS 34 gurus. And they started off as tool and die makers. Okay. And then so they started GT, Greg and Todd.
There you go.
Hence the name, right? Real creative. And then, but now they've since gone on to do divot tools. They make divot tools for golf. Okay. And they use a very similar mechanism to the biscuit mechanism. And then you press the button, and the tongs come out, and it's very cool because when it hits the blade stop, so to speak, it has this really cool ping, and it's like a signature sort of ping sound that they like to do, and for them, that's their claim to fame, and that's a different business than we're in. But I definitely think it's very cool.
You kind of answered my follow-up to that is, were you ever going to bring the GT patents that you had kind of back into the market? Because a couple of the GT knives I really, really like, but they're almost impossible to find.
They are impossible to find because
there's almost no secondary market.
I'm the only person building them. I was the only guy that was building them, and at the time, I was actually doing the assembly and the whole thing from start to finish, and it was very difficult for me to do everything that I needed to do, be traveling, be on the road, be pushing the brand, and be designing new stuff, and staying on top of all the the customer service type things, the warranty issues that may arise, and then as well as taking care of the Mantis militia guys and doing all those emails as well. Right. It was a very, very I was spread pretty thin, so I had to kind of take a step back and look and see where my time was best spent. And at that time, sitting down at the workbench and building knives just wasn't the best way, the most cost-effective way to spend my money, or spend my time, I should say. And so, so I ended up selling or making very, very few of those knives, and going more along the lines of the more gadgety looking Mantis knives, because that's what the customers were looking for at the time. That's what they were asking for. And even though the GT knife, I have not a single complaint about the performance or the design of that knife. It's just it was a knife that was before its time in the 90s,
right.
and it found its sweet spot in the early 2000s, and certainly has done me a great service. I mean, I still carry one to this day.
Is there ever going to be a way, maybe as a custom knife or something like that, where someone would be able to order one of those designs in the future, where they could, even if it's going to obviously be a little bit higher price point, because it'd be a one-time, one at a time build? Will there ever be a way to order or get those knives?
Well, I mean, it's cool that you actually bring that up, because the thought to do an automatic quartermaster knife has come up a few times, and the ability to use that tri-spoke pivot assembly piece as a button itself and hide the button behind the pivot has been thought of. Okay. You know, and the engineering behind it would be a masterpiece in the end, but it's definitely something that's being thought about.
Cool, because I mean, here in Arizona we can have whatever the hell we want, guns, knives, there's no sizes.
Just imagine how awesome that spring would have to be in order to flip that Hannibal blade out of that thing. Imagine that.
That would be pretty impressive.
Pretty awesome, right? Yeah, it would be cool. So, I mean, I promise to keep pushing the limits, and as far as design and the possibilities of what people are carrying, I definitely want to keep pushing the limits and showing people, knife fans in the industry, what's possible out there.
Right on. Well, I mean, I could ask questions for hours, but that covered all the stuff I wanted to know, because like I said, you know, it's been almost a year since we've had a chance to talk, and you know, I go on and I read these things, and I've had questions of myself, my own questions, you know, about certain designs and what happened here, what happened there. So I'm just really glad that I was able to take the platform I have, even with the 600 or 700 viewers I get on a regular basis, to kind of maybe take that and answer some of those questions that have never had the opportunity to present an answer.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the forum to answer the questions.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
And definitely, you know, come back to Arizona as much as you can.
Yeah, man. Southern Republic.
Oh my God!